everyone, and welcome back. Today we are at ACUA, the Alberta Council for the Ukrainian Arts, where we are taking a look at the Out of the Kiln Sharing Traditions in Clay exhibit. And we are joined here by the amazing curator. So we will start off with your name.
Sure. I'm Larissa Sembalak-Chaladin, and I'm the curator of this exhibit, and I worked actually together with one of my grad students, Victoria Kostanyuk, from the University of Alberta. And I put together the concept, the ideas, and then she helped me fill in with some of the information about the different pieces.
Amazing. And so can you tell us a bit about yourself and like your background and your experience?
I am a graduate from the Fine Art program at the University of Alberta. My area of study at the time was as a printmaker. And after I graduated, I illustrated, and one of the very first books that I illustrated was for the Ukrainian bilingual program, and I worked with Gene Swistatsky. He was, they were sing-along books, so he did the music, and a woman by the name of Alina Gulitsin did the lyrics, and we put out 5 books. So I've worn the hat of illustrator, but I graduated over time to painting with watercolors, and I've had some major exhibits of watercolors that have traveled the world, and giving me the opportunity to paint a lot. And research, a lot of research goes into my paintings. Themes like flowers of the Bible, and I did a show called Celebrating Women that acknowledged the accomplishments of women in Canada, Canadian women. And so I've had a lot of research background when it comes to art. And then there came a time in my life where I wanted to go back to university. And I studied Ukrainian embroidered pillows for a master's thesis. Wow. Because I'm really curious about the artist, what inspires an artist. And you'll find that in this show as well. I'll talk about some things that have inspired artists and mentoring and teaching. And I was I wanted to learn more. And once I finished my master's, I stayed to do a PhD. And so I have a PhD in Media and Cultural Studies, and media being all kinds of media, like as in digital media. My dissertation was on Ukrainian comics that are 100 years old, but right through to ceramics, and what stories do ceramics tell? What stories does embroidery tell? That sort of thing. So. And I get an opportunity to curate shows other than my own works now, because people have realized that, hey, she likes art, she likes she likes to tell stories, she likes to do the research, and so this is one of those projects where I have had a chance to look at other people's work and put together a show.
So you've lived 1,000 lives, basically, is what you're saying.
I could tell you lots of really cool stories, but yeah.
Wow. And so what kind of led you in the direction of curating shows? Like what got that started in specific?
When I planned my own shows, which a lot of artists end up doing, and my shows traveled. I traveled through South America with the one that was called Flowers of the Americas, and over to Europe. The one that was called Celebrating Women toured across Canada, and Dance Me was one that featured Leonard Cohen's works, and it was mounted a couple of times. And I realized I like putting shows together. I like putting the story together, making it interesting for people, trying to pull out things that they can connect with. And then ACUA, Alberta Council for the Ukrainian Arts, gave me the opportunity to curate a couple of other shows previously. And so I like doing it. It's a different kind of work. Mm-hmm. You know.
And in this work, what would you say is the most challenging aspect of it?
Of curating?
Yes.
Oh, there's so many. There's so many things that are challenging. When you curate a show, you have to narrow down the theme and think about how it will connect with people, like your audience. You have to know who your audience is going to be. Mm-hmm. And you also have to know a great deal of background about the subject matter, because when you go to put on an exhibit, you have to edit a ton out. It's probably very much like film, in that you get to understand it all, and then you have to summarize it in little clips, little chunks, so that people can come in, wander through, get a bit of information, and then if they want, they can go a little bit deeper. And with this show, we can even take them on a digital journey to go a little bit deeper, because we've got QR codes. It'll take you to interviews that were done with people in the past about using some of the pottery or making some of the pottery. So you, but that whole editing down so that, it's not a book. You know, if you want to know, you can go read a book. But in this particular case, you want to actually see the piece, walk around it, have it in context. Like rather than flipping pages, you can take a look around. So yeah, that's challenging to put the material together and then edit it, I think, at least for me.
I couldn't imagine doing it.
Yeah.
And so on the flip side, what would you say is the most rewarding part of your job?
There are a couple of things that stand out. It's when, in this particular show and a couple of others that I've done, where the artist of the piece sees it on display, and sometimes it's for the very first time that they're sharing it that way. As an artist, you get a certain buzz from having sold something, and it's usually one-to-one, and it sits in somebody's living room. But to see them just the pride they feel in seeing that it's out on display for more people to see is rewarding for me, knowing that I helped them share the piece, because most artists are creating to share it, and so I've been able to take it a little bit step further. The other thing is finding connections and all those little serendipitous moments when, even with this show, putting two pieces together, pulling them out of the box and putting them side by side and finding out you have just put the works of a teacher next to a student. And the vibes are there. That those there's something connecting them there, and yeah, the little moments like that are special.
Absolutely. And so you've spoken a bit about being an artist yourself in multiple different mediums, but what would you say is your favorite medium of art?
Watercolor.
Watercolor. Yep. And what is it about watercolor?
I like watching the process. I like watching what happens when the medium, like the paint, hits the paper, and getting to know different papers will do different things. Different paints will do different things. Like there's, the more, the less expensive paints have a bit of grit to them, so they don't flow the same way. It's really like a $5 tube of red from Dollarama will do certain things, and then a $22 tube of the same color that's been ground properly and has the right filler, it'll flow totally differently. And sometimes you use them both together, but I love what happens, and I'll have an idea in mind, but what starts to happen on the paper is ultimately what guides me what I should do.
And then is what happens on the paper also what inspires you?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it'll bleed in a certain way or not bleed, and you realize, oh, okay, I can add that or not add that. And I had one of I guess the best experience I had with creating a collection was for the International Leonard Cohen Society. Yeah, sorry. Okay, so the best experience was with the International Leonard Cohen Society. In 2008, they had a show here in Edmonton, and I was asked to be the feature artist. And I decided I wanted to paint to his music and film it as it was being painted.
Oh, wow. And
so, and then out of that, we edited the music to the painting, and the whole process. And then I worked with some choreographers that then danced to those live paintings. It was, the whole production was at the Citadel Theatre, and so the painting was coming alive behind the dancers, and the choreography had been done to the music. So as a swipe of paint was swooshed up, the dancers' arms came up, and it was a really neat collaborative process.
Wow, that must have been stunning to see too.
It was some of the paintings I painted straight for 12 hours, because with registration of a camera, to stop and start and stop and start. A fraction of an inch, when you play it back, it's doing this. There's this vibration that happens. And so I just said, I'm just going to go all the way through and do it. And some of those are my favorite paintings that I've done. Yeah.
That's incredible. And so do you have a favorite? Like, do you prefer painting or curating, or is it like
I prefer painting.
Painting?
Yeah. For me, at least, I'm in my own headspace. It's almost meditative. I do pre-plan. I do, like, the flowers of the Bible. There was almost 2 years of research of, like, what flowers exist in the Bible, and finding out that the Jewish, Muslim, and Christian faiths all follow the First Testament. And I didn't know, like, I learned that, and then finding out that most of the flowers are in the First Testament. And so Genesis and all the creation stories, etc. So I did all that research, and then once it was done, I could just sit and have the paper talk to me or the paint talk to me. And should this be a long, skinny painting, or should it be a square painting? Do I need to put something in as a prop next to the flower or not? What's the symbolism of the flower? I've done the research for the flowers of Shakespeare's plays. Someday I will do that, because every flower he mentions is in the script for a reason. Whether it's for remembering, or if it represents depression, or love, the meanings are all there. But I haven't got around to that yet.
You'll get there. You got
Yeah.
time.
Oh yeah.
You've already lived 1,000 lives. You'll live 1,000 more. You know.
Yeah.
That's so incredible. I have so much respect for artists who make something tangible, because, and I say that because I do like acting and writing work that kind of like is in the moment more so.
Yep.
And so just, I know the amount of effort and like precision that goes into all of the work that you do. And just, wow, it's amazing.
And that's an interesting talk. That's what inspired me to do the Leonard Cohen filming it, because you go through many, many layers, but it's only the very last layer that anybody ever sees. They don't know how it changed and evolved. Same with a piece of choreography. People only see it when it was done once. Yes, you can film them now, but that initial moment of live, and any little thing that happened will only happen that one time. Whereas a piece of ceramics like that's around me here right now, once it's been molded and it's there, it's like the painting. You see the last version of it, and it forevermore after that it'll tell that story unless somebody recorded it.
And it's crazy too, because then that piece lives, and then depending on who gets that piece afterwards,
exactly.
it also like lives a whole bunch of different lives.
Its value can change over time, up and down. Like, it could be really, really valuable, and 50 years later you find it at Value Village, and then it relives again. When I did my embroidered pillow research, at that time, what inspired me to do it is I found a bunch at Value Village that $5 each. And once I got out in the community, I interviewed all across Canada. I wanted to know, how are these women inspired to do these patterns? Where did the patterns come from? One woman looked up at the stars and said, maybe from God. She couldn't pinpoint where it came from. And once people got to know that I was going to do an exhibit at the end, I collected over 700 pillows. The value of those pillows just skyrocketed. People would lend them to me, but they would not give them to me anymore. At the beginning of the project, people said, "Oh, I found these in a trunk, you can have them." And now there's value's been reattached to them. So, and the other thing that I'm trying to bring attention to, a lot of art, Canadian art, quite often what is being created has been more important commercially than who did it. Especially in the Ukrainian-Canadian context, people are trying to create art that has a very specific symbolism and history that goes back several, 1,000 years. But who created it, they can't remember. And I'd like to let people know I think we know every piece in this collection, who made it, and what a little bit of their background story. So
that's amazing. And like, you're shining light on them, you know,
Yeah,
which is just
yeah.
incredible for them.
Yeah.
And so speaking of the artists, what does the process look like in selecting artists for
The process for this exhibit was kind of COVID interrupted. I had one idea. The title came first, Out of the Kiln, Sharing Traditions in Clay. And we were originally going to explore the actual process, the tradition of raku, or the tradition of pottery made on a wheel, or slab pottery, and started to collect pieces that represented that. And then COVID happened, and then the exhibit was postponed a bit, and people started to talk to me about different pieces they had. Maybe you'd be interested in this. And I realized the real story was in what tradition did the piece represent, just generally. Was it spiritual? Was it a utilitarian object? Was it a bowl specifically made to serve a certain food? And those traditions of what the pot or figurine represented came to light and surfaced throughout. And I forget what the rest of the question was.
I think that, the process in finding artists.
Luckily in Edmonton, there has been, in Alberta actually, there have been real waves of attention to ceramic artists, especially in the Medicine Hat area. Medalta Potteries, back in the 1920s to the 1950s, created the big crock pots and the just generic mixing bowls that all the early settlers used to make their food. And then they started, after the 1950s into the 60s, started to have artist workshops. And you found they paired with Alberta College of Art, that had a strong ceramic pottery program. And you throughout the 70s, you had a lot of artists creating work. And then you had collectors during that time. Like the artists had to sell them to somebody. Mm-hmm. And so some of the pieces came to me. You'll be really interested in one of these. There's the Pueblo artists of New Mexico, Arizona. There's a couple here in the city, Michelle and Bill Tracy, collect the indigenous art from that area. And they had some really interesting pieces that tell a story and share traditions, like a wedding vase or a storyteller figurine. And I went and saw them. I go, oh yeah, that would fit into this collection. So it was word of mouth, bringing them in. And working from that initial, there is a variety of different techniques in here, but just seeing what people had and bringing them together.
And so how long has the exhibit been open?
The exhibit opened on November 3rd, and it goes to the 25th. It's not that long. In this space, ACUA has a Christmas fair. They represent a lot of artists in the community, so the space gets turned over about once a month with a different show. Usually, in this particular case, we're one of maybe two a year where it is more of an information sharing. The pieces in this exhibit are not for sale. They have been borrowed from other people. But the front end in the boutique, we have ceramics for sale of new artists that are starting to get back into it. Again, I forget what your question was.
How long, or
how long is the show? Yeah, it's on until the 25th, and we've actually joked a little bit that could be a dry run for a bigger show, maybe at the Royal Alberta Museum. The only issue is that ceramics are fragile, and you've got to plan that takes on a whole new life to do that kind of show. Yeah.
And so we've kind of talked a bit about it, but what types of art pieces can people expect to see when visiting?
They can expect to see everything from some really old pieces that pioneers would have used or would have come with them, and would have been used by pioneers that came in 1891 might have brought something that their grandparents had used. So there are a couple of really old pieces here. There are pieces that represent, like the Tropilian pieces, represent art and ceramics from 5,000 years ago, but they themselves are not 5,000 years old. And then there are some contemporary pieces. I have we refer to as our mob of rams. Ram is a symbol of strength, tenacity, and it crops up a lot in many different cultures. So we've got this grouping of rams, we've got a grouping of roosters. There's one particular rooster when the outbreak of the war in Ukraine started. All of a sudden on social media you saw the picture of this bombed out building, and up on the 3rd floor there was a cupboard still stuck to the wall, and a rooster was sitting on the cupboard untouched. And we have one of those roosters in this exhibit.
Wow.
And the pottery company, the studio, makes many of them, and it's made from a mold, but it is that particular one, that mold of rooster. The Borodyanka rooster is what it's called. What else would they see? They would see pieces by Ted Yaku. There are also pieces from that I use as stimulation to discuss appropriation or appreciation, because artists are quite often inspired by something outside of their culture. And so we've got pieces, there's one in particular, one that was made by a woman from Germany, inspired by Inuit art that she did in raku, which is a Japanese technique of firing your ceramics, and she lives in Wetaskiwin. So, you know, like, where do you fit as far as what can you be inspired by, and what lines do you cross if you can't say that you're Indigenous, that's just not right. But you can be inspired by what you see and live and around you. Another artist, Ted Yaku, who has a Ukrainian background but lives in interior BC, you see a lot of ravens and crows and animals that we are familiar with from Alberta, from the Rocky Mountains, like bears and that sort of thing, because he lives there, that's part of his identity, his life, and he's mixed it with the heritage he comes from. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of pieces like that have kind of got a mix, inspiration happening. And we also have 3 instances of student and teacher over time, so yeah.
That's amazing. And so why do you think it's important to, like, carry out these traditions and kind of showcase all of this?
I think it's important to share different art forms with people, just in general, because not everybody can draw, not everybody can paint or sculpt. Or,
me being that person.
Yeah, but you may know, like I tell people that you may not be able to play the saxophone, but you may be able to play the piano, and those two may never ever meet, because it's totally different. Mm-hmm. But you still are expressing yourself some way, and you maybe come in here and go, oh, I never knew you could do that. And that's one of the things that I really would like people to become aware of, that there's different ways of expressing who you are or where you came from. Yeah.
And I think too, that being said, not only like finding a way for them to express themselves, sometimes I know for myself, artists do a better job of explaining it than I would.
Yep.
And so like seeing that, and then how you're saying getting inspired from that and being like, maybe I could do, perhaps not that, but maybe something else.
Something else, for sure. Yeah, that's been a lifelong process of humans, is one thing kind of comes from another. It's fluid. It's not set in stone or set in ceramics. Yeah.
So moving on, what would you say is the most surprising thing that you've learned throughout this process?
For this particular exhibit, the connections between people, because I hadn't planned to have teacher-student connections. So Ted Yaku, whose work I was very familiar with, we opened one box of someone who said, I have an interesting vase and plate, and it turns out it's from Ted's teacher, Ed Derhanchuk. And then also from the woman who did a lot of the rams, Audrey Uzweshin, opened up another piece in box and found out we have a piece of her mother's. And so Audrey learned from Vera Semenyuk, her mom. So there was that connection. One of the other interesting connections of teacher-student was we found a piece by Lida Radio, which is a Tropelian inspired. Tropelian culture existed 5,000 years ago, and these motifs are now being painted on pots, looking like contemporary pieces. And then also pieces done by Ioana Iwanusu. She passed away many years ago, and found out that the two of them studied under Mrs. Monasterska, who was their teacher, and so we have pots of all three of them in the collection. And just, those particular intersections of fate or whatever, it just happened because we were pulling them out of the boxes and kind of I knew a little bit of the history from my research. And the other thing that it's a really unique Ukrainian-Canadian phenomenon, and that is Ukrainian embroidery deckled ceramics. I created a whole room because back when the Soviet Union was really controlling the creation of art out of Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, you couldn't get any ceramics over here at all. And people started to create ceramics with this Ukrainian embroidery decals on it, because the embroidery has become synonymous with a lot of identities. You kind of recognize Asian embroidery, Ukrainian embroidery, indigenous beadwork is sort of, you see it and that belongs to those people. And so the ceramics with the embroidery on it became really popular throughout the late 60s into the 70s, because that was the ceramics they could get. They could serve like their Ukrainian Christmas dinner on these plates, and you kind of, your roots are right there in front of you. So we've set up a whole room of that, and the response, that's just like how my grandmother used to set the table. And I have the little bird that my great aunt got, and I still have it. And just those connections being made through that pottery was really kind of unexpected, but fun to see.
Absolutely. That sounds wonderful. And so, two more questions here for you.
Sure.
Do you have a favorite art piece, either in the exhibit here or just in general?
Not really. Every piece that I've created myself, there's something about it where I experimented or I tried something, and it's memorable for me. Can't say that anyone is really my most favorite piece. Although doing the ones for the Leonard Cohen collection, I think I really enjoyed doing that a lot. And the ones from the Flowers of the Americas, because Prince Philip, the Queen's husband, unveiled a show for me in Geneva.
Wow. Oh
and
my
that
gosh.
particular show, just that whole experience was special.
Yeah.
Within this collection, I just marvel at the detail that some of the artists have done, the patience they've had. Some of them have worked with tweezers to create what they created. So there are a couple of reliefs that the little pieces have been dropped in. They're really tiny, and they've been put into the imagery with tweezers. The rams, to get those the fine little ram's curlicues, like how they did it. The ram's wool, finding out that it was done, some of it with like a garlic press. You just put the clay through a garlic press, and finding those little details out and how innovative people are, has been really kind of interesting and fun to find out.
And so my last question isn't specific to this show in particular,
Okay.
But what would you say is the best piece of advice you've received throughout your life?
The best piece of advice I've been given has been to explore. No matter what you try, just see what it can do. So if it's a piece of clay, can you make it roll a ball with it? Can you, roll it like a piece of dough? Can you hammer it, punch it? What happens when you jab it? Same with watercolor. What happens if you pre-wet the paper? What happens when you do paint dry? What happens when you mix two paints, acrylic and oil, just so that you can experience the possibilities. Because as soon as you narrow yourself down to just one little area, believe it or not, you can get bored. and you never know what might happen when you put a couple of things together, when you just explore.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. part of this collection that I really found intriguing that really spoke to sharing traditions was we have a couple of wedding vases from the Pueblo wedding people, their wedding ceremony. These are people living in New Mexico, and they create a vase that has two spouts. And traditionally, it's made by their parents, and then the couple will each drink from the two different sides. What's in it varies, but it represents the two coming together. And we have two very traditional ones decorated differently because they come from two different communities. And then one in the middle that is contemporary artist's interpretation. So, you know, the tradition is there connected to the shape and the form, but has been interpreted in a couple of different ways. These particular pieces here are I would say, probably the oldest in the collection, and they are utilitarian. They were used to make food for families, for the settlers that came in the early 1920s, 1930s. They would have come with pots like this, and the two on top were used for several generations before they came to Canada, and they're made in such a way with this wire that goes around, and it's not decorative. It has two purposes. First, to keep the integrity of the pot, so when it is traveling and being used, it doesn't break. But also, the metal wire will distribute the heat evenly in the bowl. So I was learning a lot of physics at the same time as same time as I was researching the pieces. So this is the Borodianka rooster, the one that people start to identify with at the beginning of the war as a symbol of resilience and defiance, because this chicken was sitting on a shelf in a kitchen in a building that was bombed out, and nothing happened to it. Now this particular mold used for this chicken, they've been producing them and presenting them to people to acknowledge their resilience to different, some of the soldiers who've had been injured. Their lives has changed dramatically, but they're still going to go on. Diplomats to remind them that Ukraine is a resilient, independent country. We can survive this. And so the particular rooster, but it's in keeping with roosters from many different cultures, represent that strength, that fertility, fertility in that we will continue on, we will be productive, and not give in.
Hey friends, we finished up at the exhibit and we ended up walking by White Rabbit. That's why I'm holding ice cream right now. So really good day to be us.
Truthfully.
But that was so much fun.
Beautiful exhibit. Like,
it was
stunning.
gorgeous.
Everyone
work.
there was if you can check it out, please do, because even the history behind it is crazy. It's just beautiful. I've said that twice. But.
Yeah, you have until November 25th. It's stunning. So, like, you learn so much. And art, I personally just love art and think it's beautiful. So, do it. Go. Check it out.
Definitely check it out.